isolated valley of Argentina, fossil hunters are on the deadly trail of a dinosaur, a killer from the prehistoric past. Dinosaurs didn't invent killing, they perfected it. Now the hunters become the hunted, as paleontologists close in on the rise of the predators. A Cretaceous night, 125 million years ago. A new terror lurks in the primeval forest. The hunter is new, but the hunt itself has been choreographed long ago and far away. A jagged stretch of sun-baked desert in west central Argentina is aptly named Valley of the Moon, in the native tongue, Ishigualasto. Here, in the distant past, some cataclysmic upheaval tore a gash in the earth, striking the mother lode of fossils, a vein some 50 miles long and 900 feet thick. Scattered everywhere here are bones for the taking.
For a paleontologist, you usually spend days and sometimes weeks carefully scrutinizing the ground, walking always in the heat and always in the desert, trying to find fossils. And then when you do find one fossil or two or three, it's a great discovery. And here in Ishigualasto, the minute you enter the valley, you start seeing fossils. And your problem is not discovering them, but trying to decide which ones you want to keep.
William Sill has come here in search of the holy grail of paleontology, the first predatory dinosaur. 230 million years ago, the Valley of the Moon was a very different place, a lush forest full of strange creatures. Lumbering through the undergrowth was a harmless little reptile the size of a pig who grazed on plants. It was a rhynchosaur, slow-moving and dim-witted, and a long-time inhabitant of the Triassic jungle. The rhynchosaur probably never noticed the newcomer's forest until it was too late. The predator would one day be called Eoraptor, the dawn thief.
That was the meat-eating, the rapacious kind that leaped out of the dawn, attacked those poor little rhynchosaurs in their nests, tearing them apart, just loving every minute of it. Huge claws on his fingers, vicious attitude, sharp teeth. Oh, he had a great time.
The newcomer with a vicious attitude and with teeth and claws to match was the most primitive dinosaur ever found.
Here's the site where Eoraptor was found, one of the most remarkable discoveries that have been made in Ishigualasto, and gives us our insight into this predators of remarkable nature and what they became afterwards. Eoraptor was found by a young paleontologist by the name of Paul Sereno's expedition, but actually it was Ricardo Martinez that found it after a month and a half of searching and not finding anything. And then one day he decided to get down on his hands and knees and look over this spot at every single rock, and that's how we found it.
Smaller than a human hand, the skull of the Eoraptor hardly seems worth the fanfare. But for University of Chicago paleontologist Paul Sereno, this tiny predator marks the beginning of momentous things.
Eoraptor comes closer to the common origin of dinosaurs, the ancestral dinosaur, so to speak, than any other animal we've ever discovered before. It's two-legged and it's versatile in the way it could move across the ground, and there was nothing quite like that before. And we think that this actually characterizes all dinosaurs at the beginning.
The Valley of the Moon has been kind to Paul Sereno. 3 years before he discovered Eoraptor, his team uncovered the most complete skeleton ever found of one of the first spin-offs of Eoraptor's cunning predatory design. Called Herrerasaurus, it would prove to be bigger and even nastier than Eoraptor. Today, a jubilant William Sill and his team have found a Herrerasaurus of their own. It is exquisitely complete and chilling in its details.
Here we found just this last week a new skeleton of a Herrerasaurus, a beautiful skeleton, complete skull, vertebral column, most of the limbs. From the skull especially, you can see by the long, recurved, biting, grasping teeth that he was a very active predator. The recurved teeth allow him to sink his teeth into a prey, and the prey cannot get away. It's just like a fish hook. That the limbs were completely rotated under the body, and the fact they were bipedal means that their front limbs, their arms, were short and provided with huge claws that would be used for grasping and tearing at their prey. I see them as kind of a two-legged tiger with huge claws on his front limbs, dashing in and ripping and tearing and then leaping back. And of course, this is what we believe, at least some paleontologists believe, was the reason why the dinosaurs went on to rule the world for the next 150 million years.
Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus are the closest thing paleontologists have to a dinosaurian Adam and Eve. Their upright stance set them apart from the reptiles and freed their hands for deadly mischief.
What we're seeing in these early dinosaur predators is the evolution of a grasping forearm, a forearm that is no longer specialized for locomotion, but rather the animal's balancing on its hind limbs, and clearly it's got a semi-opposable thumb and a very prominent hand and hand claws to go about grabbing something while on the run.
Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus must have terrorized the same forest some 223 million years ago. Their fossils have been found in the same sediments in the Valley of the Moon. But in size and design, Eoraptor already seemed simple, while Herrerasaurus was an omen of things to come. At 15 feet long and over 500 pounds, it could overpower as well as outmaneuver its prey. And it evolved yet another hallmark of future killers, a more powerful jaw.
Herrerasaurus in the lower jaw, it has a flexible lower jaw. There's a little joint in the middle of the lower jaw which allowed the animal to actually clamp down on struggling prey.
Herrerasaurus would pass this remarkable jaw down the predatory line all the way to the last and greatest of its kind, Tyrannosaurus rex. The fossil-rich Valley of the Moon has presented the expedition with another gift and another window into the ancient world of the first dinosaurs. It is a perfectly preserved skeleton of a rhynchosaur, one of those squat, hapless reptiles on which the Herrerasaurus mercilessly preyed.
Here we found one of the best rhynchosaur skeletons that I think anybody's ever found anywhere. It's a remarkable skeleton. Every single bone of the body is complete and well preserved. And that is so unusual to find. Not only that, but he's spread out in the anatomical position as if he were on a laboratory dissecting table. The details on this specimen are incredible, right down to the claws on the tips of the fingers. This, for example, is a claw that would fit on the finger about like this. The tip of it is the only part broken off. And we assume these were used for digging, as the animals were somewhat like pigs and probably had a rooting habit or looking for vegetation. They had these large claws on all of their fingers that would have helped them dig up roots or other kinds of vegetation.
The world into which the dinosaurs were born was distinctly not a tranquil place. It was dominated by animals headed down a quite different evolutionary path. Creatures like the strange sailback Dimetrodon, half reptile, half mammal. These mammal-like reptiles were larger, fiercer, and far more numerous than the first primitive dinosaurs, and should have outcompeted them for prey. Fossils of mammal-like reptiles also dominate the red sediments of the Valley of the Moon, presenting paleontologists with a puzzle. How did the dinosaurs ever get off the evolutionary starting line?
Now this animal, the cynodont, Exoretodon, was one of those mammal-like reptiles that played such a tremendous role in the origin of dinosaurs, and they're the ones that should have gone on to dominate the terrestrial world. Instead of dinosaurs, they were almost like mammals. They disappeared, leaving behind their descendants, the true mammals, as little tiny animals that spent 150 million years hiding out from dinosaurs. And instead, the dinosaurs, who should have been slow-witted reptiles, took over the world and totally dominated every ecological environment for 150 million years.
$210 million years ago, in the last days of the Triassic, the world was changing. Small, agile killers flourished and spread around what was then the supercontinent of Pangaea, like Styracosaurus, found in what is today Brazil. In southern Africa, Syntarsus. And its remarkably similar North American cousin, Coelophysis. Captured in their death throes, frozen in time, dozens of these little dinosaurs fossils were found in New Mexico in 1947. Adults, adolescents, and young animals alike, entombed in a sort of primeval Pompeii. Today, paleontologists are teasing the remains of the oldest dinosaurs of North America out of the rocks of Ghost Ranch. Fleet, fierce little dinosaurs like Coelophysis represent the changing of the guard at the end of the Triassic. It was the quick and the vicious who would inherit the earth. And so the descendants of Eoraptor and Erarosaurus, who retained a taste for flesh, all bore the unmistakable stamp of the predator. Dinosaurs that are separated by millions of years in time and by orders of magnitude and size are just variations on a deadly theme. Based on their strong family resemblance, paleontologists call all of the carnivorous dinosaurs theropods, meaning beast foot. These, then, are the hallmarks of all the killing cousins of the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, balancing on clawed feet, the long tail and the compact chest, small, slender arms for grasping, and the remarkable head, in itself a fearsome weapon, the deadly engineering of a powerful, double-hinged jaw. It was, in the classically Darwinian mode, a case of success breeding success, or if you happen to be an unfortunate member of the prey species, terror breeding terror. Though the basic model remained the same, evolution would drive different species to hone different aspects to predatory perfection. Some would become the fleetest animals ever to stride the ancient earth, a class of ostrich-like dinosaurs called ornithomimids, meaning bird mimics. The ostrich-like mimicking ornithomimuses, like Gallimimus, pursued smaller game, lizards and insects, at a top speed of about 60 miles per hour. 125 million years ago, a new line of dinosaur predators were making their spectacular debut. Only recently discovered, these dinosaurs, it seemed, would choose to perfect every weapon in the deadly arsenal of the dinosaur predator. The early Cretaceous is a time we know little about. In these layers, the fossils are particularly elusive. But in 1991, in the early Cretaceous deposits of Utah, Dynamation Society paleontologist Jim Kirkland brought one dinosaur roaring to life. This is Utahraptor, 20 feet long, over 1,000 pounds. It wielded one of the most frightening weapons ever devised, a spring-loaded, razor-sharp sickle claw, more than a foot long.
This pit right here was the attachment for a very powerful tendon that would wrap under the foot and up into the calf muscle. When this animal employed the claw, this tendon would snap it down and it would go through a full 180-degree arc around its foot. Effectively, with the length of the claw itself, this would make a cut more than 2 foot long. However, we also have to consider it was holding on to its prey with its forearms and then kicking out with both hind feet like a cat, probably doing this once per second and a half. Each time it would cut, it would make a cut 5 to 6 foot long, slashing through an animal, probably between the ribs. Doing this several times would slice between each rib, opening its belly like an accordion, and its viscera would drop out, and the animal would proceed to feed on the dying dinosaur that it had attacked. Very vicious animal indeed.
Utahraptor spawned a line of raptors called dromaeosaurs that would terrorize the rest of the Cretaceous, other sickle-clawed killers like the Deinonychus and the Velociraptor, but following an evolutionary path that seems somehow backwards.
So we start looking at the pattern, we see a very interesting pattern. Utahraptor, 1,000 pounds in the early Cretaceous. As we get to the late early Cretaceous, Deinonychus, 100 pounds. Late Cretaceous, Velociraptor, about 50 pounds. Getting progressively smaller. If we look at most other groups of organisms, elephants, horses, the first ones are small and they get progressively larger through time. It's a very unusual pattern and nearly unique for these groups, the dromaeosaurs.
There are very few things a predator can trade for sheer size or strength and still survive. The raptors were almost certainly investing in the most dangerous weapon of all, intelligence. The dromaeosaur Deinonychus, or terrible claw, revolutionized our perception of dinosaurs as lumbering creatures. Deinonychus was clearly built for speed and multiplied its deadliness by hunting in packs. Velociraptor, the dread star of Jurassic Park, was probably not as uncannily intelligent as the movie portrayed, but it too was cunning enough to successfully hunt larger dinosaurs. A stunning fossil find in Mongolia revealed the Velociraptor and the Protoceratops locked in mortal combat. It was here in Alberta, Canada, that the real genius of the Cretaceous emerged. An animal whose brain, by the standards of the time, was simply enormous. known only by a handful of teeth. Troodon eluded paleontologists for decades. Tyrrell Museum paleontologist Phil Curry is the world's leading expert on predatory dinosaurs.
1982, we were working in this area and we found a skull from a small carnivorous dinosaur called Troodon, and it's the best skull that's ever been found of that animal. What it reveals to us is that Troodon was a very large-brained animal, in fact the largest brained dinosaur known. We found a lower jaw which had both the teeth and the jaw itself. We have a pretty good idea what Troodon is. And that little dinosaur was fast. It ran around on its hind legs, which were very long and built for speed. But like Velociraptor, it had a large toe on the inside of its foot, which was raised above the ground, and had a big curved claw that it used to slash its prey, probably in the belly region. So in addition to being the most intelligent dinosaur, a dinosaur that's closely related to birds, it was also a nasty little animal that probably captured his prey with a lot of ease.
But its nastiness and eating efficiency would not save Troodon from the fate that took all the dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous. Troodon had everything going for it. It was intelligent, lethal, and had plenty of food available. But its nastiness and eating efficiency could not save Troodon. 65 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous, the extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs didn't spare Troodon. It is perhaps the greatest puzzle of dinosaur extinction. The parched earth of the valley is a great stage in which the dinosaurs made their auspicious debut. The team carefully prepare the specimens for transport back to the lab.
Wait a minute. You're going to have a snag in there. Fill that in with plaster, please. Oscar.
For Dr. William Sill, the Valley of the Moon has produced treasures from the age of dinosaurs, the first primitive dinosaur predators, their hapless prey, and a new mystery.
Okay, good, good. Looking good. It'll be our first complete skeleton of we don't know what. We think it's a ceratosaur. Okay, la posición, anote la posición.
If the Valley of the Moon has a tale to tell, it is this. In the evolutionary dance of life and death, it is the predator who leads. The neat design of the beast foot, the two-legged killer, legs tucked under, grasping forearms, slicing claws, gaping jaws, and the glimmerings of deadly intelligence helped catapult the dinosaurs to world dominance. The predators would come and go. It was the design that would not die. Even the deaths of the dinosaurs could not extinguish the design itself, for the mark of the predator remains with us to this day. The predatory dinosaurs have simply taken to the skies. For most of the dinosaur era, fast, vicious, deadly, flesh-eating predators were no larger than tigers. Then came a fiendish new strategy for survival. Dinosaurs began to grow, some as big as a building. Huge, monstrous, and overpowering, they would become known as the Great Carnosaurs. The Badlands of Alberta, Canada are thousands of square miles of nothing but scrub, brush, and sand. Yet this place is a gold mine for paleontologists. The landscape is riddled with fossils, including those of the most terrible land animals that ever lived. Here, more than 500 dinosaur skeletons have been discovered. 75 million years ago, this was a coastal plain close to the sea and lush with plant life. For most of the dinosaur era, which began 245 million years ago, predators remained no larger than today's land animals. The forces that would eventually drive evolution had yet to emerge. The continents were knitted together into a single landmass called Pangaea. The climate was warm and dry. Dinosaurs roamed freely. Then, 200 million years ago, Pangaea broke apart. Isolating dinosaur populations and creating a revolution in their development. Some plant-eating dinosaurs grew enormous. To survive, the dinosaurs that preyed on them had to grow too. As much as 30 times larger. And they perfected their arsenal of weapons. These were the connoisseurs, a general name given to large meat-eating dinosaurs. At least 15 feet long, they walked upright on two legs, had large heads, dagger-like teeth, and very short arms. These are the killer dinosaurs every child loves and the mainstay of old science fiction movies. Their modern reconstructions draw thousands to theme parks. Their bodies as big as buildings. Their steps made the earth tremble as they chased their prey and tore it apart with their powerful jaws. Some of the first examples of connoisseurs were found in Alberta's Badlands. Embedded in stone, dead for at least 75 million years. Albertosaurus is a member of the most highly evolved, the most fearsome, and deadly connoisseur family of them all, the Tyrannosaurs. Its killer cousin is perhaps the best-known dinosaur of them all, Tyrannosaurus rex. Here in Dinosaur Provincial Park, Phil Curry and his team from Canada's Royal Tyrrell Museum have just uncovered the remains of a killer.
This quarry was only opened 3 days ago, but enough has been exposed already that we can identify what kind of dinosaur it is. If we look at this rib, for example, we can see the head. In front of the rib are a number of very slender bones, which are called gastralia. And gastralia are special bones that cover the belly region of tyrannosaur dinosaurs. And from the size of these gastralia and the shape, we can tell that this is a tyrannosaurid. This is a vertebra from the trunk region, and just being uncovered right now. are a series of vertebrae from the neck. And again, these confirm that this is a tyrannosaurid. We think at this point in time that this is probably a half-grown Albertosaurus.
Curry and his team are covering Albertosaurus with a plaster cast so it can be transported safely back to the lab for examination. Like all connoisseurs, Albertosaurus used its massive head as a weapon. Its jaw was longer and its teeth bigger than earlier predatory dinosaurs. This extra equipment would have made the skull heavy, but nature is ingenious. The skull acquired holes and its bones were hollow, but critical stress points within the skull were heavily reinforced. Albertosaurus was the size of a small bus and weighed 2.5 tons. It had a thin build with a pointed snout and a severe overbite. Paleontologists used to think connoisseurs were slow, lumbering creatures, just overgrown alligators and crocodiles. Some suggest they were even too big to hunt and depended instead on scavenging. But Curry believes that based on the footprints of smaller predatory dinosaurs with similar leg structures, connoisseurs were in fact swift and agile.
For example, an ornithomimid, one of the fastest dinosaurs known, when it was walking, would take fairly short steps. But as it moved faster, those steps would increase greatly. And by measuring the distance between two left footprints or two right footprints and the length of the foot itself, we can calculate how fast those animals were moving.
From his studies of ancient footprints left in mud, Curry estimated the 6-foot-tall dinosaur moved about 15 miles an hour. When it wasn't hampered by mud, it could probably run much faster. Albertosaurus and the other connoisseurs were probably not as fast, though most paleontologists agree they could outrun a human. Some estimate they could move up to 40 miles an hour. Just in speed and size alone, these were terrifying creatures, but it was their arsenal of killing tools, including their jaws and powerful necks, that inspires awe. Most think of dinosaurs as giant creatures, but many were quite small. It wasn't until the end of the Cretaceous era, 65 million years ago, that the giants truly emerged. Their rise to dominance was destined 200 million years ago, when the supercontinent of Pangaea broke in two. The newly forming mountain ranges and inland seaways isolated the dinosaurs into smaller and smaller groups. This geographic isolation is the primary event that makes evolution work. It allows for greater diversity. As the land masses drifted apart, both plants and animals began adapting to their new environments by evolving a variety of strategies for survival. Among the plant eaters, ankylosaurs developed heavy armor and a clubbed tail. Triceratops evolved shields and enormous horns. And the Seismosaurus simply grew huge, as big as 5 elephants, the largest animal ever to walk the earth. In the game of survival, size proved to be a successful strategy. But when sheer size wasn't enough, some plant eaters found safety in numbers. They formed herds for additional protection. To keep up with their prey, meat-eating dinosaurs grew larger as well. But size wasn't enough. To maintain their advantage, they had to be smarter and faster. If they weren't, they would starve.
We know that whenever there's a major change from one group of animals into another group of animals, it usually happens in the meat-eating animals, not in the plant-eating animals. There's a lot of reasons for this. But generally we find that within a group, there's an influence between the meat-eaters and the plant-eaters. The plant-eaters are trying to get bigger and better arms so that they can protect themselves better against the meat-eaters, but the meat-eaters have to stay ahead in that arms race. They always have to be a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more faster, because if they're not, they won't eat.
The basic strategies of carnivores and their plant-eating prey were similar throughout the world. But in geographic isolation, curious physical changes were in store. One place to investigate these changes is Argentina. Here, new and unusual connoisseurs are being found. In the past, most dinosaur fossils were unearthed in the northern hemisphere where paleontology originated, and fossils were easily located. Because of the long period of isolation between the two supercontinents, when a new dinosaur is discovered in South America, it often has novel features. Jose Bonaparte of Argentina's National Museum of Natural Science in Buenos Aires has been called the master of the Mesozoic. He has studied dinosaurs in Argentina for 3 decades, longer than anyone else. In 1985, Dr. Bonaparte discovered a 1-ton meat-eating dinosaur called Carnotaurus. His find surprised paleontologists. Carnotaurus appeared shortly after the continent split apart. The skull was very tall for its length and strongly built. But its most unusual feature is the 2 large flat horns jutting out over its eyes. Carnosaurs usually have very small horns, if any at all.
This skull, as you say, is very unusual for a carnivorous dinosaur because it is provided with very large horns. We understand that this horn helps the animal for killing the prey because the forearms of this animal are very much reduced.
The back of the skull was designed to anchor powerful neck and jaw muscles, the hallmark of connoisseurs. While many of the early predators killed by slashing with claws on their feet, the connoisseurs developed huge sledgehammer heads and jaws so powerful they could easily rip through bone and armor plate. The mouths of many connoisseurs had a special hinge that allowed them to open wider. Carnotaurus had a hinge that enabled it to widen its mouth sideways as well. It was adapted for taking especially large bites, as large as 100 pounds a mouthful.
This articulation enabled the animal to widen the mouth, to make this movement. And this movement helped for swallowing big pieces of meat, because the animal was able to widen the lower jaw in this part that is the place for the swallowing of the piece.
Carnotaurus puzzled scientists. Despite its huge jaw muscles, its lower jaw is half that of a T-Rex of similar size, and its teeth are more slender. Also, Carnotaurus is significantly smaller than the giants that evolved later, such as Allosaurus, Spinosaurus, and T-Rex. And yet, Carnotaurus is the largest predator ever found in South America and clearly the dominant animal. Its slender lower jaw may not have mattered. It could kill and eat anything it wanted, and it had no enemies. The connoisseurs that came after would further perfect body structures to become truly remarkable killing machines. As paleontologists expand their southward search for fossils, they are discovering connoisseurs that are strikingly different from those previously known. One of the oldest giant connoisseurs was found here, just 400 miles from the South Pole. In 1991, a geologist working in the area discovered a fragment of bone, luring paleontologists to the frozen wasteland to investigate. During the dig, the temperature never rose above 25 degrees below zero. Diggers moved 5,000 pounds of rock to free their amazing find. Cryolophosaurus, the frozen crested dinosaur, was a 25-foot-long flesh eater. It is the first dinosaur to be unearthed in Antarctica. At 190 million years, it is also one of the oldest connoisseurs ever discovered. Paleontologist William Hammer of Augustana College in Illinois led the dig.
So this is the eye, this is the top of the head right here, and these are ridges, long narrow ridges that run along the top of the head from where the nose would be back to above the eye, and then these ridges merge in the middle and form a very large crest. And this is the most unique thing about the skull, this crest.
Its crest was most likely used for display purposes during courtship, like a peacock's tail. Although other connoisseurs had some type of headgear, Cryolophosaurus's was significantly larger and too fragile for fighting. When Hammer began to separate it from the rock, he and his team made another discovery. They had found not one dinosaur, but two. It seems Cryolophosaurus was devouring a large plant-eating dinosaur called a prosauropod when it died.
Well, it seems that this animal was eating another one when it died. In fact, it might have even choked on the ribs of a plant eater. There are two ribs from another plant-eating prosauropod here in the mouth. They start here behind, in the back of the skull. You can see them going right down all the way into the mouth between the jaws here. This is the back end of the skull, right below where the vertebral column or the backbone would attach. And you can see two ribs going down, and you can follow them all the way down into the mouth, right between the jaws. And these are the lower jaws here, and this was broken off. It would extend all the way out had we the rest of the skull.
With the discovery of the Cryolophosaurus, science can now trace the evolution of the connoisseur back almost 200 million years to the Jurassic period. The reduced arms, sledgehammer head, and steel trap jaws would continue to be refined over 135 million years, until an animal would evolve whose every feature down to the core of its bones was created solely for killing. As the large connoisseurs, such as T-Rex, became more efficient at the end of the Cretaceous, they forced out all other predators. They became the sole large flesh eaters. Phil Curry believes these evolutionary changes were beginning to snowball.
But towards the end, during the Cretaceous, we're seeing an acceleration in diversification and greater changes taking place. So it appears that things were evolving very slowly initially, but towards the end of their reign on the Earth as the king dinosaurs, or the top carnivores, they were diversifying much more rapidly and changing much more rapidly.
Whether hunting alone or in groups, connoisseurs were deadly. They would rush in at tremendous speed, scoop out a huge hunk of flesh, then leap back and wait for their prey to bleed to death. Risk-free and very effective. Based on the habits of modern predators, the connoisseurs probably hunted at dawn or dusk or on moonlit nights. They may have only eaten once a week or even every other week, but when they ate, it might have been 1,000 pounds at a sitting. In North America, Albertosaurus and Tyrannosaurus took two evolutionary courses. Tyrannosaurus took the fast track and became larger and stronger. Albertosaurus remained the same size. It was quicker than T-Rex, but not as big. As connoisseurs evolved their fast, long legs and large meat-scooping jaws, all else was pared away. Their arms and shoulders grew smaller, no bigger than a man's.
The reason they developed the short arms is to reduce the amount of weight in front of the hips. As you get bigger, you end up having more mass in front of the hips, and if you're a big meat-eating dinosaur, you suffer the possibility that you're going to fall on your face if you have too much weight up front. So what these animals did was reduce the weight as much as possible. Regardless of the fact that they're very short arms, they are nevertheless quite powerful. And one would assume that these animals were in fact grasping their prey, holding on to them while the jaws did their dirty work.
We know how connoisseurs were built, but what did they really look like? Some speculate they had lizard-like skin. Others suggest they were more like birds and perhaps even had feathers. Now, Jose Bonaparte has found the first direct evidence, a skin impression from a connoisseur.
This is interesting because some paleontologists suppose that the carnivorous dinosaurs, they had some feathers, but we have discovered not the slight indication of feather in the skin impression.
Reconstructing the shape of a dinosaur's head is fairly easy. The heads were mostly skin and bones, so the shape closely matches that of the skull. The body is more difficult. The skeleton is a clue to its size and bulk. Probably the most difficult question is what color were they? The small predators were probably camouflaged with stripes and spots. But camouflage wouldn't make much difference to a 20-foot tall killer, so the biggest connoisseurs were most likely a dull green or gray. Based on the size of their brain case, the last of the connoisseurs had added a new feature to their already impressive arsenal of weapons: intelligence. It is a characteristic of all pack hunting animals.
I think that you need a relatively high degree of intelligence to work as a coordinated group, as a packing animal. And it's not surprising that most of the most intelligent animals today are in fact some of the more intelligent animals that we're aware of. So it's not surprising that amongst the dinosaurs, the ones that we think are packing animals are the ones with the largest brains.
The later connoisseurs' eyes looked forward, giving them depth perception, thus allowing them to strike more accurately. And they had a highly directional sense of hearing. At the time of the great dinosaur extinction, 65 million years ago, the great connoisseurs were rapidly diversifying and becoming increasingly sophisticated. The pattern for two-legged dinosaurs with big heads and sharp teeth started early in the dinosaur era and carried through until they had become the most terrifying and deadly animals ever to walk the earth. It's a good thing for humans that they went extinct, otherwise mammals, including ourselves, might never have evolved. Yet one wonders, how much further could the connoisseurs have progressed? What deadly new adaptations might they have evolved? Could they have become any more frightening? For a century, this giant beast has rampaged through the plains of our imagination. But today, new fossils raise a heretical question. Was T-Rex just a Mesozoic garbage disposal? What other nasty shocks might science hold in store for our favorite villain, the legendary T-Rex? No dinosaur has held a more ferocious grip on the popular imagination than Tyrannosaurus rex. A celebrity of international renown, T-Rex is a universal symbol of rampant destruction and blood-chilling terror.
Professor, there's a big lizard back there and he's heading this way. Now get aboard!
Portrayed by Hollywood as insatiable and unstoppable, Tyrannosaurus has been cast as the ultimate predator. The all-time bestseller among dinosaurs, its teeth are for sale as plastic souvenirs. Welders create metal replicas of T-Rex to keep up with the public demand for its monster image. Famous for its nasty disposition, Rex stands guard at motels, ice cream parlors, and in public parks across the nation. The size of T-Rex is frightening. 3 times the height of a man, it weighed up to 7 tons. Its powerfully muscled jaw was filled with jagged, 9-inch teeth. But most frightening of all, this gigantic animal was a flesh eater, the largest carnivorous dinosaur ever to stalk the earth. The presence of T-Rex in museums all over the world suggests an abundance of fossils. But in fact, most Tyrannosaurus on display are only models, cast from the few real fossils in existence. Although T-Rex roamed the earth for 2 million years, until recently, its reputation was founded on only 9 incomplete specimens. All were unearthed in the Badlands that stretched from Wyoming and Montana into South Dakota and western Canada. When T-Rex first appeared 67 million years ago, a shallow inland sea bisected North America, preventing Tyrannosaurus from reaching the eastern part of the continent. The first T-Rex was the prize of legendary dinosaur hunter Barnum Brown, who discovered it in 1900, and Henry Fairfield Osborn, who named it. Both men worked for the American Museum of Natural History. At the time of T-Rex discovery, dinosaur fossils were already attracting huge crowds. For sheer size, nothing like them had ever been seen before. What the fossil record lacked, human imagination provided. This movie version of a battle between T-Rex and Triceratops spawned a monster of mythic proportions that would survive for most of this century. Today, Jack Horner, curator of paleontology at the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana, is one of a new breed of scientists questioning traditional ideas about dinosaurs. His suspicions that T-Rex might be an imposter began early in 1990 when a woman named Kathy Wunkel brought him an arm bone she found in Macomb County, eastern Montana. Horner began excavating what would become the most complete T-Rex on record. Buried for 65 million years, the huge fossils required earth-moving equipment to take them out of the ground. The bones became the starting point for a new reconstruction of T-Rex by Montana sculptor Matt Smith.
This is a 1/20th scale model of the Museum of the Rockies Tyrannosaurus Rex, about 38 feet long. One of the things that you notice right off is how narrow from a dorsal view it is, based on the ilium and dorsal vertebrae and the ribs.
T-Rex was once seen as a lumbering, tail-dragging beast. The new version could chase its prey at speeds up to 30 miles an hour. much faster than a human running at top speed. But Horner was not convinced T-Rex deserved its reputation as history's most awesome predator.
When Tyrannosaurus rex was first found, Barnum Brown brought the specimen in. Henry Fairfield Osborn was the first person to work on it, or certainly the first one to describe it. And he gave it the name Tyrannosaurus rex, which means tyrant lizard king. Well, and pretty much said it was a predator, but he didn't base that on anything. I mean, he didn't really do the work necessary to determine that it was. He just pretty much said it was. It was a big carnivorous animal, the largest one ever found, and the assumption was that it was a predator.
That assumption inspired the quintessential image of T-Rex as a hunter and a killer. But what Horner saw was an overgrown scavenger, a gigantic vulture preying on dead carcasses. He admits his view of T-Rex is not a popular one.
People don't want to hear that Tyrannosaurus was a scavenger. They want to know that it was a predator, because for some reason that's really special.
Much of T-Rex's reputation as a hunter is based on its huge size. But like a vulture, one of the largest carnivorous birds, T-Rex could have used its size to scare other scavengers away. Horner compares T-Rex with a group of predatory dinosaurs that includes Velociraptor, Troodon, and Deinonychus, all built for speed.
If you were going to design a bipedal predator, you'd make a Velociraptor. They have a short femur, a short thigh bone, and a long tibia, or shin bone. And that gives them the leverage to run. That's why an ostrich can run faster than we can, even though we're about the same size. We have a femur and a tibia that are the same length. Tyrannosaurus rex also had a femur and a tibia that were the same length.
For the first time, the prestige of T-Rex as a predator seemed to teeter on the brink of disaster. But soon another Tyrannosaurus rex, bigger and tougher, would take on the challenge. The lack of vegetation and the rapidly eroding sandstone on the arid badlands of South Dakota are ideal for searching out the bones of ancient creatures. Here, fossil collector Peter Larson of the Black Hills Institute has found the widely scattered remains of duck-billed dinosaurs, large plant-eating animals that were the favorite food of Tyrannosaurus rex. In 1990, Larson's team also found the largest T-Rex ever discovered. At their lab in Hill City, the team concluded that their new find was a female tyrannosaur because it lacked an extra chevron bone found on T-Rex males. Larson believes the extra bone anchored the sex organ of the male T-Rex and allowed it to be retracted when not in use. In honor of the team member who discovered her, the new T-Rex was named Sue.
Sue is slightly larger than the Museum of the Rockies specimen. Not only is each bone a little bit longer, but each bone is actually bigger around, more meaty, more beefy, more robust than the Museum of the Rockies specimen.
Again, the popular image of the tyrant lizard king seemed in jeopardy. For in size, it appeared that the male T-Rex was no match for its tyrant lizard queen.
It's really not unusual for females to be larger than male Tyrannosaurus, because in many other species we see the same thing. We see it in most invertebrate species, in most fish species, most amphibians, many reptiles, and even some mammals where the female is larger than the male. And it's really only in those species in which males compete for the right to impregnate multiple females that we see the males become larger.
Sue and her kind lived here from 67 to 65 million years ago, at the end of the age of the dinosaurs. Then the land was lush and full of life, according to senior dinosaur scientist at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Canada, Phil Curry.
In this part of the world, we would find that the habitats and the countryside would look a lot like the Gulf states or northern Florida does today. there was a diversity of environments along the rivers and so on, and there were wide open areas, and there was some lowland marshes and so on, but there were good places for the Tyrannosaurus to live. They could seek out food in a variety of habitats, and maybe some of those habitats favored them for hunting.
Curry believes this habitat favored T-Rex because it contained a variety of potential prey animals. Sharing the environment were vast herds of duckbill and horned dinosaurs, which provided T-Rex with the enormous quantities of flesh it consumed each day. At Egg Mountain in northern Montana, Jack Horner has found a bone bed containing as many as 10,000 duckbills buried by a volcanic eruption far more devastating than the eruption of Mount Vesuvius that buried Pompeii. For Horner, herds like these are evidence Tyrannosaurus lived by scavenging.
We had duckbill dinosaurs and horned dinosaurs traveling in these giant herds. And we can make an analogy to the Serengeti plain of Africa, where we have the giant herds of wildebeest traveling by the millions. And those herds have scavengers that actually follow them, vultures and hyenas and all sorts of things. If the tyrannosaurs were not scavengers, there probably wasn't a scavenger, so we had hundreds of animals dying and nothing eating them, which seems unlikely.
The teeth of T-Rex have been found among the bones of the duckbill and horned dinosaur herds that wandered across the late Cretaceous landscape. But both Phil Curry and Peter Larson disagree with Horner's scavenger theory.
The reality is that there really are no pure scavengers and there are no pure hunters. A lion will eat food that's already dead if it finds it, or it will take it down if it can't find dead food. Tyrannosaurus rex and the other theropod dinosaurs would have been in the same kind of position.
I believe that Tyrannosaurus rex would not pass up a free meal. It would scavenge when a meal became available, but it's not going to wait around for something to die. When it's hungry, it's going to go out and kill.
Whether Tyrannosaurus killed for its food or ate carcasses, Peter Larson's colleagues found physical injuries on Sue's skeleton that proved one T-Rex was not afraid to attack another.
In fact, one of these ribs back here next to the shoulder, we found that never really did properly heal. And back inside, in that exostosis, that extra bone that grew around this infected area, we found the fragment of another Tyrannosaurus rex tooth. Sue was bitten and fought with, probably many times over her life, other Tyrannosaurus rex.
Larson also found that Sue had been taken care of. She had once shattered a leg bone, which then healed. This meant that for a long time she had been unable to walk and could only have survived if another T-Rex had brought her food. But then, says Larson, she was killed by one of her own kind.
We found injuries on her skull which were not healed, where the postorbital, the bone behind her eye, was crushed down. The squamosal actually had puncture marks in it, and the left side of her lower jaw was ripped out of its socket and pulled to the side. I believe that Sue's face was actually ripped off by another Tyrannosaurus rex.
The size and completeness of Sue promised to help resolve questions about the behavior and feeding habits of Tyrannosaurus rex. But before she could be further examined, a stroke of ill fortune whisked her away. On May 14, 1992, FBI agents entered the facilities of the Black Hills Institute and took Sue into their custody. Peter Larson had paid $5,000 to the owner of the land where Sue was found. But the site was inside the Cheyenne River Indian Reservation. A federal law prohibits outsiders from contracting with Native Americans to remove antiquities without the permission of the federal government. The local United States attorney ordered Sue to be confiscated, along with all photographs, records, and papers relating to Sue and her discovery. Local townspeople were enraged. A source of local pride had been taken away from them.
Sue right now is locked away in a sea freight container in storage crates And we haven't seen her for more than 2 years, and it may be years yet before we'll be able to see her, or anybody else will be able to see her. We've been fighting this battle for more than 2 years now and trying to get Sue back, and we are going to exhaust every avenue that's available to us until we do finally get her back, until she finally comes back to the Black Hills Museum of Natural History.
A year and a half after her seizure, a federal appeals panel ruled against Larson and the Black Hills Institute, returning Sue to the possession of the landowner. Undaunted, Peter Larson continued his search for more specimens of T-Rex. In 1992, he excavated a less complete skeleton he named Stan. Meanwhile, Jack Horner's challenge to the conventional view of T-Rex would continue to inspire debate. How could a monster with a gaping, powerful jaw full of saber-like teeth be anything but a killer? When he first discovered T-Rex in 1900, Barnum Brown assumed it was a predator. It was certainly the largest meat-eating dinosaur ever found. The monstrous skull of T-Rex in particular seemed designed for killing. Engineered to be strong, it was also light. Large holes in the skull reduced its weight. But the bone structure was strongest in the jaw to withstand the awesome force of the muscles that could crush the bones of any animal.
This is a jaw of a real Tyrannosaurus rex. You can see one of these huge teeth in place in the jaw and another tooth lying on the side of the jaw here. You can look at this long root and how it's anchored into the jaw. This was a killing machine. This was a machine which could bite through even the leg bone of another Tyrannosaurus rex.
Jack Horner is not convinced. Whether it hunted or scavenged, T-Rex would have needed its steak knife teeth and enormous jaws for cutting the huge quantities of meat it consumed into smaller chunks. But Horner's argument pivots on another part of T-Rex's anatomy, its tiny arms that have puzzled paleontologists for decades. Horner has found with the Montana Rex the first complete arm bone of Tyrannosaurus ever discovered. Though T-Rex was over 15 feet tall, its arm was no bigger than the arm of a man. Horner commissioned sculptor Matt Smith to reconstruct the arm of the Montana Rex, using the musculature of a variety of modern-day animals and birds for comparison. A biomechanical study of the arms showed that the animal could lift up to 400 pounds. It was stronger than expected, but still puny for an animal that weighed up to 7 tons. Horner concluded the arms were virtually useless for capturing prey.
Tyrannosaurus Rex's little arm would not reach its mouth. One arm wouldn't reach the other arm. He couldn't clap. Try to imagine yourself trying to catch a chicken with your hands tied behind your back. I mean, you'd be a mess. A bipedal animal needs to be able to stabilize its prey, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex couldn't do that.
Unquestionably, the arms of T-Rex were much less efficient for capturing prey than those of Allosaurus, an earlier dinosaur that resembled T-Rex.
If we were to compare Tyrannosaurus rex forelimb with an older bipedal carnivorous dinosaur, Allosaurus, you can take a look at its hand, and it was made for predatory behavior. Now, when you compare that to Tyrannosaurus rex, its hand has become smaller and apparently more specialized.
But by far the most impressive evidence that Rex was a predator were its senses. A large meat-eating dinosaur must be able to find its potential victims anytime, anywhere. And T-Rex had the means to find them. A keen sense of hearing, for example, well adapted to tracking down moving prey. And unlike most dinosaurs, its vision was stereoscopic, which made it easier to see movement.
If you look at the eyes, you can see that the eyes are extremely large, and the optic lobe of the brain is also well developed. So again, there's an indication that it has a good sense of sight. Furthermore, in Tyrannosaurus rex, the eyes are facing forward. And like human beings, they would have had stereoscopic vision. This is something that'd be very useful if you're a hunter, not so useful if you're a scavenger.
The eyeball is going to be really tiny, really small. But if we look at the animals like Velociraptor or Troodon, they have huge eyes. They have huge openings for the eyes.
Perhaps even more important for a meat-eating animal than its sense of hearing and sight was T-Rex's ability to smell its potential victims, alive or dead.
It has a huge olfactory bulb on the brain. We know this from CAT scanning a relative of Tyrannosaurus called Nanotyrannus. This olfactory bulb gave it a tremendously acute sense of smell, a sense of smell which is not necessary for someone who is only eating carrion. I mean, we as humans who have a very poor sense of smell can smell rotting animals sometimes a mile away.
Remember in Jurassic Park, the guy says, "Don't move, the Tyrannosaur won't see you." Well, he might not have seen you, but he certainly would have smelled you.
For Tohono, the large olfactory lobes of T-Rex have a different meaning. For an animal that feeds primarily on dead animals, the sense of smell would be the most important sense of all.
And in fact, if you compare the size of the olfactory lobe to the brain size, a Tyrannosaur had a larger olfactory lobe than any animal that ever lived except a turkey vulture.
To some, the still unresolved argument over the true nature of T-Rex's feeding habits might seem pointless, a scholarly exercise with little impact on our lives today. But what of the millions worldwide who cater to the Hollywood image of T-Rex as our worst nightmare? If it turns out to be a scavenger after all, would Tyrannosaurus Rex be ruined forever as the monster we've grown to love? In 1994, paleontologist John Storer discovered another T-Rex, this one in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan. After only 9 T-Rex finds in all the years from 1900 to 1990, 3 nearly complete skeletons have been found in the space of only 4 years. And with the increasing interest in paleontology, more fossil hunters are on the trail of the elusive Rex. Perhaps the world will soon find out if it was truly the monster it was made out to be. Could it really be a gigantic prehistoric vulture? For now, its reputation is safe. For most of us, it is still the quintessential dinosaur. The one, the only, the legendary Tyrannosaurus Rex.